You are listening to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda. On this episode, I talked to John Schofield from the Northern England-based melodic hardcore band Without Love. Yes, you heard me right. You recognize that name of that band if you are a propaganda fan. Without Love is fantastic, and if you've never heard them, they sound like this. For the last few years, John and I have corresponded here and there, and I have grown to really enjoy his messages and his band and talking to him about, just general things in relation to some of the episodes that we've talked about over the last few years. It was a delight to welcome him to discuss his band, Without Love, what it's like to care about ethically sourced merch as a band in 2023 and 2024, and we then do a deep dive into his favorite propaganda songs, A Speculative Fiction, Potemkin City Limits, and Moris Rasik. During the Potemkin City Limits section, we talk quite a lot about John's time working in the factory farm animal industrial industry. So if that gives you any squeamish feelings, just heads up on that, okay? If you want to check out Without Love, go to withoutlovehc.bandcamp.com or find their EP Surrender, their split with Time Heist, and more anywhere you stream music. Thank you so much to John Schofield for joining me. Please enjoy our conversation. John Schofield, welcome to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda.
Hi, Greg. Good to be here.
John, I'm delighted you're here. Why don't you go ahead and spend a moment and introduce yourself a little bit to the listeners out there so they know a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, sure. So first and foremost, I'm a fan of propaganda.
Yes.
That's why I'm here. I live in Sheffield in the UK, and I play bass and do vocals for a band called Without Love.
Wonderful. Okay, so Sheffield, northern town, right?
Yeah, I think it's like the last bastion of the north before you get into the Midlands. Yeah.
Nice. Very cool. Yeah. I was talking about your band the other day with my friend John, who sings in a band called Zero Cost from Hull, and I was like, "Have you guys ever come across Without Love yet?" And he's like, "No, not yet." So I'm hoping to create a unity of a network of bands across northern England who are into propaganda and just create a little scene there,
Yeah, like a support group for people that are way too into propaganda.
It is a thing. Yes, it is absolutely a thing. John, tell me a little bit about your band, because obviously any discerning listener out there who just heard you say the name of your band their ears will have perked up at that band name. Tell me a little bit about what's going on with the band.
Yeah, sure. So obviously we're named after the song from the musical Hairspray, Without Love.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've been playing together. I think we put out our first EP in 2022. That was something me and our guitarist, my best pal Henry, have been working on since our previous band broke up. So I guess as it is with all new bands, quite a few stumbling blocks along the way. We're trying to get a lineup together. Then the pandemic happened. Went through a bunch of other people trying to get another guitarist and a drummer for the band, and just not finding people that wanted to do the same thing or couldn't commit the time to it. So the two of us decided to just record the first EP off our own backs, and we didn't know if we thought we'd put it out there, see if anybody else wanted to get involved. We didn't know if we'd ever end up playing any shows, etc. But pretty much as we were wrapping up the recording, we got Greg and Joe involved, who make up the rest of the band. And then got the EP out there, started playing some shows. And it's been yeah, to say we, I never thought we might play any shows. It's been going pretty well since, so can't complain.
Wonderful. Very cool. Well, I know I've got your Surrender EP, which
Yeah,
thank you for mailing that to me as well. I've been listening to
no
that. I
problem.
actually have a cassette player in my house that I can actually play it on. So whenever that popped out of the package that you sent me, I was like completely delighted. And I was like, "Oh, this is great." Because you're like my fourth cassette. I have like four cassettes, and yours is one of them. Um,
No, that's cool. I think, yeah, I think for a lot of people, the cassettes are more collector's items, but yeah, it's nice to know some people actually listen to them.
Yeah, and you've got like three releases too. You've got a split
Hmm.
and then another standalone single. It looks like called Common Enemy. Is the How
Yeah,
are you feeling about the band's creative process and outlet so far? Because you guys are still a new band, but you seem to be churning out some releases pretty well.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, we put the EP out first, 2022. Then we went back to the studio and recorded the songs for the split and that standalone track all in one session,
Hmm.
without really having an idea of how we were going to put them out. We ended up finding Time Heist, who are a straight edge band from Colorado.
Hmm.
So yeah, we decided to do the split with those guys, and we had one extra song, so we decided to release that as a standalone. And yeah, they came out sort of early to mid 2023.
Nice.
Um, yeah.
I'm curious about your local scene
Hmm.
too. Um, so like I live in Buffalo and right now we're kind of having like a hardcore like renaissance right now.
Yeah.
Like our
Yeah.
local scene is so amazing at the moment and I'm just kind of like really blown away and floored by the scene that we got going on here. I'm curious about like what's going on, what are you enjoying about like where you live and the people that are around you and the bands that are around you. What's going on over there?
Yeah, sure. So where I am in the UK, there's a lot of other, fairly big cities that aren't too far away. Leeds, Manchester, that which is where the other guys in my band are based. Yeah, Leeds has always had a great hardcore scene. Particularly, I feel like that's one that never really dropped off the map that much compared to other cities. But yeah, at the moment, the Leeds hardcore scene's probably stronger than ever. Some great venues, DIY venues that are always at the risk of shutting down just because of funding and stuff. But they've got amazing gigs on, like multiple gigs every week and stuff. Bands coming from all over to play. Um, Sheffield, the hardcore scene's I'd say is really strong at the moment. Quite a few new bands. Yeah, and just again DIY venues that are keeping the scene running.
I
Um,
love it.
and then Manchester, it's got punk gigs, hardcore gigs, and it's one of those cities where if bigger touring bands are coming through, they're pretty much always going to hit Manchester. So yeah, plenty to do in the area.
Awesome. Man, that's great. What is kind of like your origin story with music? Kind of take me back to like how you got like into these like genres of music that we find ourselves kind of enamored with to this day.
Yeah, I think for me it all started probably when I was about like 10 years old. Getting into bands like Offspring, Green Day. Uh, I don't know what it was like where you are, but in the UK, it seemed like there was a real sort of boom in that kind of music at that time. I think it was more off the back of bands like Linkin Park and
Hmm.
Slipknot sort of having a moment, but it just seemed to, sort of alternative sort of music was the thing then. So yeah, I got into all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, was kind of finding all my dad's old records, like Iron Maiden, Sabbath, Motorhead, um,
Sweet.
and he got me into other stuff as well, like Nirvana and early Foo Fighters. So I feel like having kind of everything coming at me from different directions, like yeah, gave me a good grounding in like metal, rock, punk.
Did your dad like take you to shows? Like my dad took me to my first ever show in 1998. My mom took me to my second ever show in a few months later, also in 98. And it's just kind of like it's neat to have a family that's kind of like, willing to entertain the musical whims of the formative years of a child. You know what I mean? So I'm grateful to
Yeah,
my own parents for doing that for me. But it sounds like your parents were actually like into the music that kind of is like a gateway to where you went on to listen to and play.
yeah. So I think the first gig I went to with my dad was Iron Maiden.
Oh man.
Uh,
Okay.
so, so that was cool. I was probably a bit felt, to say I'd been into music since I was like 10, I was probably quite late going to gigs, maybe like 14, 15.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it was Iron Maiden, and then I think the next one we went to after that was Foo Fighters. Uh, yeah, and I can't remember after that. I think then I started like, I've been going to my gigs with my dad ever since. But after those first couple, I think that's when I started branching out and going to see smaller things with friends and stuff.
Awesome. How did you get into Propaganda specifically?
Yeah, so weirdly, I can like my memory is not great for certain things, but I can really specifically remember just sitting on looking on probably Facebook at the time, and I think Comeback Kid had shared
Mm.
the song "Dear Coach's Corner."
Oh, perfect.
So I was pretty late to the party with Propaganda, but I definitely heard the name around in the past, and yeah, I'm always guilty for like having to hear a band's name so many times before I actually finally check them out. But yeah, I just remember putting it on and yeah, being blown away,
Mm.
and
You
I was
know,
like, okay, got to dig deeper with this.
it's super interesting too that you found Propaganda. Like I'm actually kind of a little jealous of the way that your introduction to the band is actually from my favorite record. Do you know
Mm,
what I mean? Like I just
yeah.
imagine having the first time I would have ever heard that band be supporting cast and how just mind blowing that would have
Hmm.
been. Because the first stuff I ever heard was obviously on the Fat Records compilations and stuff like that. When I started getting those like 96, 97 kind of stuff. So my intro to the band was when they had a totally different sound, but I'm like, man, what would it have been like to be introduced to a band like that when they were at their supporting cast era? So I'm
Hmm.
actually kind of jealous that that was your intro.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for some people, they'll probably think I'm operating on a full poser level, not finding out about them till then. But yeah, it was a great place to start, and it's still my favorite album. Um, yeah, obviously heard that song, listened to the rest of the album, and then I also remember really vividly Googling because I was like, right, I looked at they had a bunch of albums out. I was like, oh, what's a good place to start? And I remember Googling like, what's the best Propaganda album, or what's a good place to start with Propaganda, and found some old forums and stuff, and they were all saying, oh, How to Clean Everything's by far the best Propaganda album. And
Mm.
I remember
Mm.
listening to it and being like, what? I mean, yeah, I know obviously for a lot of people that's a very important album, but I think
Yeah.
when you've started with supporting cast to work back, it's yeah, it wasn't what I was expecting. So yeah, then
Yeah.
I just sort of I think at that time that was probably 2011, so Failed States wasn't out yet. Um, and yeah, I went back and yeah, as soon as I heard today's Empires, tomorrow's Ashes, I was like, right, I'm in now. And
Perfect.
then Potemkin, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, well, what's really interesting, John, is that you've got a trio of songs that you picked to discuss on the podcast. And I love that those three songs um, you know, come from those records, right?
Mm,
You've got
yeah,
Mataka Marisuku and Rasakan from Today's Empires. You've got Speculative Fiction from Potemkin, and you've got Potemkin City Limits, not from Potemkin City Limits, but
yeah.
from supporting cast. So you've got a specific era
Mm.
and run of albums that you pick. So tell me a little bit about your process for choosing the songs that you wanted to discuss.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably the hardest question I've ever been asked was choose three propaganda songs to talk about.
Yeah, you're not the only person that says that too. A lot of people have a like. I think about my friend Christian Bassaraba who hosts the Rad Dads podcast. He spent like a couple of weeks and
Yeah,
made copious notes on his song selections. So it was actually pretty comedic watching him break down the process. So you are not alone in your challenge, I promise.
yeah, sure. I mean, I could have picked three from supporting casts. I could have picked, I love the two more recent albums as well. Definitely some standout tracks
Hmm.
on everyone that I could have picked, but yeah, I was trying to find a balance of ones that I love for the musical side and for the lyrical side as well. So, and yeah, I wanted to try and cover a few different eras as well. So
Awesome. Well, let's talk about do you want to go in chronological order for the songs? Do you have a particular sequence that you would prefer to go in today for your tunes?
yeah, could we start with speculative fiction?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool.
So tell me a little bit about your thoughts on Potemkin City Limits, just kind of as a like a standalone piece.
As a whole album.
Yeah, the record.
Yeah, I think when I first listened to it, I loved it, but it's probably the one that's I find has more to offer the more I've gone back to it.
Mm,
There's definitely some of the more proggy stuff that, you know, I'm a sucker for the fast and heavier songs.
hmm.
So although I always listen to albums as a whole as much as I can. Maybe the proggy ones wouldn't have been the ones that stood out to me as much when I first listened, but
Yeah.
yeah, the more I've gone back, the more I appreciate those songs. So I think it's probably their most musically, probably their most ambitious album,
Yeah.
I would say. But yeah, some great songs on it.
Something that I would do whenever I would put this album on for years is that I didn't want to do any work on
Mm.
enjoying the music. Like I wasn't like wanting to like put in the effort to be like, okay, I'm gonna look for what's awesome about this song. So for years I would put this album on and I would just listen to speculative fiction and then I would skip right to Die Jugendmarschiert and Rock for
Hmm.
Sustainable Capitalism.
Yeah,
And then I would skip right to Name It and Address Withheld into Super Bowl Patriot into Iteration. So like for years I was really only listening to like five or
yeah.
six songs on this record with each listen because I wasn't like wanting to do the work
Hmm.
to enjoy the other stuff. Does that kind of resonate with your experience as well?
Yeah, I mean, I maybe wouldn't skip tracks, but they would be the ones that I was like, looking forward to coming up on the album.
Hmm.
And maybe tuning out a little bit for some of the slower ones. But yeah, I think as well, it's once you've dived into the lyrics a bit as well, that's when you get even more appreciation and do want to sit and listen to those
Yeah.
more intricate
Awesome.
ones.
Okay, so why did you pick speculative fiction as your selection of Potemkin City Limits?
Yeah, I think overall it's probably one of my favorite propaganda songs. Full stop.
Hmm.
Um, I think it's because they've got such a diverse sound and do so many different things across their catalog. I think it's quite a good one that covers a lot of those aspects. And if I'm trying to like get people into propaganda, it's always the first song I play them for
Ah,
that reason.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've had that conversation with other people. Like, if you were
Mm.
going to introduce them to the band, what would you do? And for a long time, I was like, I think Tertium Non Dater is my selection. And people are like, no way, you're crazy. It's speculative fiction, or no way, you're
Okay.
crazy. It's nation states. And so I was trying to be like not select one that was like
Mm.
super duper obvious, but like when the more you think about it, like whenever I've watched Propaganda play live in the last couple of years and that opening riff comes in and then watching the crowd go completely bananas, it's like this is like one of the main ones. You know what I mean? This is
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
every single person wants to hear, like no question, any show.
Yeah. And I think because it's kind of pretty much in the midpoint of their career in terms of looking at the studio albums anyway, it's yeah, it's just good. I think it's a good place to start.
So, as a musician yourself, like I always love talking to musicians because the ways that musicians observe songs performed by some of their most influential artists, like they tend to pick up on stuff that maybe I don't pick up on just by
Mhm.
thinking about music as like a songwriter or just just a player in general. I'm wondering what it is that you enjoy particularly about this song musically, whether it's, guitar, bass, drums, any of the individual instrumentation, the vocal delivery, like the production. I'm just curious what really stands out to you about the musicianship and the musicality of this particular tune.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to try and talk in very technical music terms because that's not
That's
something
totally fine.
I
And
know
if
how
you
to
wanted
do
to, you
really.
could though.
I think just looking at it from an overall point of view, I think it's the back and forth between like the melodic sections and then the heavier thrashy sections and the way they interplay. And it's sort of, it starts out with that nice, beautiful chords into the thrashy guitars. Then it sort of keeps dropping back to those sort of picked melodic notes. Um, and it ties together so well, it doesn't sound jarring in any way. Um, and I really like that it's kind of the first half of the song is like one unrelenting sort of fast section into another, but also they all stand out from each other. Yeah, and I think that's not an easy thing to do really in terms of songwriting. Yeah, and then just that think that break in the middle is with that riff is just one of the tension it's building is just next level. And yeah, as a bass player, I've got to give a shout out to the bass tone when it's sort of before it comes back in with the bit before "We Don't Care If We're Destroyed."
Yes.
The bass coming in that is one of my favorite bass bits. Yeah.
Yeah. The bass on Potemkin City Limits in general is amazing. Like
Mhm.
the last like 35 seconds of Fadala's Hearse contains
Mm.
some of my favorite bass playing and like all of Propagandy's records. So it's like Potemkin's got something interesting going on, like with the bass tone and recording that just kind of stands out to me in a way that's unique among all the records.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
I love that. What kind of gear, like, do you ever take any like gear influence from any of these like bands that you listen to? Like, what are you like as a bassist yourself? I'm wondering, like just sticking on bass for a second,
Mm.
like, how do you go about like selecting your gear for your own personal performance and recording?
Sure. I mean, price point is usually the
Sure.
the first thing I'm looking at. Um, yeah, I've watched a few rig rundown things on
Mhm.
online. There's way more stuff for that for guitar than there is for bass. But I think there's definitely a propaganda video where they talk to Chris and a rig rundown interview. I'm pretty sure Todd had something on there as well. Um, but yeah, I mean, my stuff is kind of just cobbled together from what I've seen being sold secondhand on various sites, and just look at it and think, yeah, that probably work for what I'm wanting to do. Um, but yeah, I think like in terms of trying to dial in your tone, it's some of those rig rundown videos that you see are quite good. I've got Sansamp, which is kind of like the holy grail for bass, really. Yeah, just finding other videos where people are using those and seeing what settings they've got it on and just playing around. Um, yeah, and then in terms of my bass, I play a Fender Jag bass,
Hmm.
which yeah, I think for bass, it's for me personally, it's a bit of a combination trade off between the aesthetics of the bass and finding one that sounds good. So yeah, I was playing an active bass for a long time, and it was perfectly fine when I was playing it, and then I got this passive Fender Jag bass just because I saw it going second hand, and I like the look of it, and it turned. I was going to have it as like a backup bass almost, and yeah, I ended up preferring the sound of it. So um, I play that pretty much all the time now.
Yeah, you've got a an iconic, in my view, iconic. As a
Hmm.
Propagandy fan, I'm always like online and on social media, like looking at like Propagandy shirts and like stuff like
Hmm.
that. And you've got this shirt, this picture of you at one of your shows where you're like mid headbang and you've got a Propagandy t-shirt on. And it's like that Propagandy shirt with like the
Mm.
palm print
Yeah,
across
yeah,
the front of it. And I think that's a UK shirt manufacturer that did that, right?
yeah. I'm trying to remember the full story behind it. I bought it online, and I know it's printed on No Sweat,
Hmm.
which is pretty much the highest standard of shirts you can get in terms of ethical manufacturing.
Yeah.
And yeah, they're UK based. I can't remember if I bought it direct from their site, but yeah, the design was done by the vocalist from the band Petrol Girls.
Oh yeah, that's a great
Um,
band.
and yeah, I've seen them and Propagandy play together. So yeah, I honestly can't remember where I bought it from. I think it might have been No Sweats. I feel like I actually emailed somebody to buy it. I think they weren't even. It wasn't even like an online store. I think you just had to hit them up via email to get hold of one. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's one of those shirts where I don't want to wear it too much
Yeah.
because just dreading it falling apart or
Well, I
anything
mean,
happening to it.
just for like listeners out there who like you would have to be kind of not paying attention at all to know that merch and ethically sourcing shirts and like venue merch cuts and things like that have been a part of the scene dialogue for the
Mhm.
last several months.
Yeah,
And when I got your shirt in the mail, I was really like impressed by like the information on the tag of the t-shirts and stuff like that. So it seems like you as a band are also taking these things into consideration, kind of like, where the rubber meets the road, putting your money where your mouth is and using ethically sourced and produced shirts as well. Like kind of what's like your decision process like that as a band? Because you're not going the cheapest route for your merch,
yeah.
but it seems like you're doing something as far as merch goes that that you all can like live with yourselves, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was completely put onto that by Propaganda and Petrol Girls. Um, yeah, there's some things that are like what I would class as like an in between. They're not as bad as Gildan, but they're not
Hmm.
the best. And I think for our first couple of merch runs, we had to go with some of those brands, just because of what was available and because of cost.
Yeah.
We were a new band. We didn't want to be selling our shirts for more, so much that people wouldn't want to buy them at all. And then with each sort of new t-shirt design, we've tried to get like the next best produced garments in terms of ethical standards, and put the prices up a bit if we've needed to. The last run we actually got done on no sweat, and we got the prices back, and we were like, oh yeah, it's the cost price is like quite a lot per shirt.
Hmm.
We're not trying to turn a massive profit on them, but obviously we need to cover our costs. At the end of the day, I would rather do sell less shirts and have them on better quality garments with, and people aren't getting, aren't being produced in sweatshops. So yeah, it's just the way we're obviously not a full time band. We're not
Right.
relying on this for an income. So I can understand why some bands don't make those decisions. But yeah, for me, I would rather just maybe sell a few less shirts and sell them on better, fairer clothing.
Awesome. Well, thank you for entertaining my total derailing side tangent based on
No,
your gear selections and t-shirt sourcing. Let's go back to speculative fiction for a
sure.
second. I'm curious about your thoughts on like the lyrics
Mhm.
on this one, the story that's told within this one. I absolutely love it, and I almost love that Potemkin City Limits, the album, has this one as the opener and Iteration as the closer because they both are like these speculative fiction, creative
Mhm.
writing experiences that like portray these different scenarios that are both so interesting in their own ways. But like it's like a bookend to the album
Yeah.
of these kinds of songwriting. And I'm
Mhm.
wondering, just tell me a little, some of your thoughts on a speculative fiction lyrically that you really enjoy.
Sure. Well, yeah, I love that it's so open with it being a speculative fiction. It's in the title of the track. It's probably the only repeated lyric in the song. It's not like he's just written these lyrics and letting people find it out for themselves. I like that he's being very clear with it in that way. Um, and I think in terms of using that as a lyric writing idea, I like that they sort of use it sparingly. Uh, I think if you had a band that did that for every song, it would maybe wear out its charm kind of quickly. But I
Hmm.
think the fact they do it, the way they do it, uh, yeah. So I think obviously this song, Iteration, as you mentioned, I think even the start of the track Victory Lap is kind of like that idea,
Hmm.
same idea. So yeah, I like that it's used sparingly, and yeah, I think I'm sure in terms of the content of the song, it could have written it a different way, just saying, it's obviously all about Canada sort of cutting ties with the US. I'm sure there's a thousand other ways he could have gone about saying, I think Canada should cut ties with the US because of this, but it's I think you just get a lot more nuance to the topic, and it kind of lets you put ideas into it that you're not saying I necessarily agree with this part of the idea, but here it is as a story, and you can look at the positives and negatives associated with that.
Hmm.
But yeah, in terms of the lyrics themselves, I think at a quick glance you could interpret it as as Chris being like very pro Canadian. It's got the reference to the Battle of 1812, and it's kind of got the David versus Goliath underdog mentality, which you kind of see with nationalistic ideas. It's almost as if they're the ones being oppressed by the US. And I think for Canadians or people in other countries, it's kind of easy to see Canada as like a very progressive country just by comparing them to their closest neighbor.
Right.
But I know with Chris that's not really his stance. I know he's got plenty of critiques of the Canadian government, and the Western countries in general. And you know, for me, one of my biggest issues with the UK is, the so-called special relationship with the United States
Hmm.
that we have that just seems to be, our reason to follow the US into every conflict in the last, however, certainly in my lifetime.
Yeah.
Uh, it seems like that's just the UK's raison d'etre now, to just to be there to be another sort of branch of the US military almost. Whether it's Iraq, Afghanistan, or the more recent strikes in Yemen.
Hmm.
We're always the first behind the US in going on these ventures. And yeah, since Brexit in the UK, and us leaving the European Union, I think our ties to America are trying to be even stronger now, because we've sort of lost possible trading opportunities with other European nations.
Mm.
So I think it's just this us getting into bed further with the US. And I'm not saying that's where Britain's history of causing problems around the world has started, because obviously that is far from true.
Of
We've been
course.
we've been doing enough bad stuff on our own for pretty much all of history.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd be happy if our government sort of put the foot down, said, we're not going to go following the US on all these things. But and I'd be maybe, like this song suggests, you'd kind of be proud of your country for standing up for more what you believe in. But it certainly wouldn't make me see the UK in a very favourable light overall.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, and I think I really like the lyric at the end, about replacing the slogans of "United We Stand" with the bit about "You can pry my gun from my cold dead hands." I think that's Chris's way of saying that they would be just the same as the US, and it's kind of like that nationalistic. It's almost like the idea of the American Revolution against the British. Obviously, that's where the whole Second Amendment stuff comes from. And I think it's Chris is saying, even if they did cut ties with America, they would then be no better themselves.
Well, I mean, as an observation on that, so I've got a couple of observations
Mm,
on what you just said. The first one was related to Canada, and I used to live in Canada.
mm,
I did a degree at a university in Saskatchewan in Western Canada, and a lot of the friends that I made there would always say things like the United States and Canada are like 10 years apart. Like if you look at the rise of George W. Bush, a while later you see the rise of Stephen Harper in Canada
mm.
as like the prime minister and the leader of the country. So it's like there's a lot of the people in Canada see what the US does, and then they see that as a prediction for where they're also
Okay, right,
headed.
that's interesting.
And a lot of people in Canada have talked to, like, especially in like a province like Alberta, which is like super into like oil refining. They
Mm,
call them, a lot of people say it's like the Texas of Canada, right? But there's also a huge healthcare privatization movement in Alberta, and across the country to, privatize a lot of the national health insurance options that are available to people in Canada. So it's like this partnership that like leads to predicting of trends of where the countries go next. So that's an interesting thing to point out about what you just said about Chris's thoughts on Canada just becoming like the US almost no
mm,
matter what, even if they
yeah.
cut ties. So that's fascinating. I really like that connection. The other thing that you said about the UK is interesting because I used to live in the UK
Mhm.
also, coincidentally. I lived in Surrey in like 2008 through 2010. I was a teacher down there in the south of your country. And I followed Brexit pretty closely. And I had not really thought too carefully about how going through with Brexit might lead the government to just throw themselves full bore into
Yeah.
closer trade relations with the US, because I always saw those trade relations as really close already. But the
Mhm.
fact that Brexit could lead to a lot of diminished opportunities economically, for the UK, and then where they would go as an
Mhm.
alternative to that, I hadn't really thought about it expanding with the US, and then how that might lead them to be so economically tied to the US that they would just throw their their horse behind absolutely any absurd conflict that the United States winds up getting involved in. So I really do appreciate those couple of observations because you just gave me a couple things to think about that I hadn't really considered before.
Yeah, sure. And obviously it's been a few years now since Brexit sort of actually in place, and I don't know, I don't know in terms of figures on trade how much
Sure.
trade has picked up with the US, but I know that was like a big thing that people were anticipating could happen. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. And if you think about like wars and stuff like that, if the US goes and gets involved in some kind of thing, like, and the UK is like really invested and has a lot of eggs in one basket as far as like economics and trade go, and the US is doing things that maybe the UK doesn't feel so great about, but a lot of their business
yeah,
relies on being supportive of the US, then it could see themselves getting drug into stuff that they don't necessarily want to be involved with,
yeah,
just by proxy. You know what I mean?
absolutely. Well, yeah, and I think it was just in the news last week that there's I don't know if it's rumors or that there's going to be American nukes, stored in Britain because of the threat of Russia. So yeah,
Yeah.
getting back to that.
Oh, great. We're going to
Yeah,
re-escalate the Cold War. I mean,
exactly.
we already kind of have been, but something else that's really interesting is when I was in the UK on just with tourism with my friends in like 2004,
Mm.
we left the UK and we took a flight over to Ireland. And when we were in Ireland, we started seeing these signs for like a protest all over the streets, and we found ourselves marching against the US military using Shannon Airport in Ireland as a refueling station on the way
Okay.
to the Iraqi the
Mm.
war in Iraq. And so it was so interesting to just be like over there, like, jacking around with my friends, like drinking our faces off, and then find ourselves like marching against something that our country was doing. And it's a really formative moment in my life, being in another country and then finding myself marching against the actions of my own country while I'm on
Yeah.
vacation drinking with my friends. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, it's good to see everything like that from another perspective. So yeah, I imagine that was quite a good
It's really
opportunity.
crazy. And like if you search like that 2000 July 2004 protests, Ireland, Bush, Shannon Airport, all the articles pop up. So I like went back a few months ago and I was rereading some articles about the protests that like we were at. And I was like, man,
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
so cool to look back on this like, 20 years ago and see all those sources still existing online. It's great.
That's good.
Um, okay, John, do you have any more thoughts on a speculative fiction? What a great couple of observations. I love this kind of stuff.
Uh, yeah, I mean that kind of sums it up for me. Yeah, great song, great lyrics, great framing device for the lyrics.
I love it.
Yeah,
It's so fun doing this podcast for like over almost 4 years and seeing the ways that people relate songs to examples in their own life. It never gets boring for me. So I love the way that you connected some stuff that you're observing in your life, throwing it out there, and then I make connections in my own life. It's amazing how deep the well is for a band like this. You know what I mean? It's just kind of incredible to me all these years into this podcast, like how we can still have conversations that are so meaningful based on like a paragraph of lyrics from a rock band from Canada.
and I think that's the great thing about their songs. That they do hone in on pretty specific topics, but I think they write them in a way that it's still relatable, however many years later in a slightly different situation.
Yeah.
I'm sure they wish that it wasn't relatable and the world had got a lot better in 20 years, but yeah, unfortunately, that's not the case.
Yeah. Cool. Well, let's go to your next song. What song do you want to chat about next?
Can we do Potemkin City Limits next?
100%. Uh, So, Potemkin City Limits, not from the LP Potemkin City Limits, but from supporting cast. You kind of already talked a little bit about how supporting cast was your gateway to the band, so
Mm-hmm.
that's really cool. Um, how do you like rank this record in like your love of the band?
Yeah, it's still my favorite record by them as a whole piece. I think the songs from other albums that I would maybe class as my favorite songs are standalone tracks, but I think as a whole record, this one is the yeah, still at the top spot.
I love that because, as you most likely know, because I say it on almost every episode, this is my favorite record as well. And so let's talk about the tune Potemkin City Limits. I don't know if you heard it, but Chris did an episode on his Patreon
Yeah,
about this song. And did you get to listen to that?
yeah, I heard that one. Yeah.
Did you hear the like alternative versions of like the slower versions and the demos and all the stuff that he
Yeah.
included in that episode? I mean, what a treat, right?
Yeah, it was amazing. And it's always great to get a look behind the curtain, but I definitely prefer how the final song turned out compared to that. I think I can't, it's been a while since I listened to that, but what I seem to remember was it was more of a straightforward kind of upbeat, fast song, and
Mm-hmm.
didn't have that sort of brooding bridge section,
Yeah.
which I think is not necessarily my favorite part of the song, but I think it just makes the song so much more dynamic and
Yeah.
just adds a lot compared to having it be more of like a hesitant to use the phrase pop punk, but that kind of upbeat, fast, punky song all the way through.
Yeah, like I could not believe the alternative version and it was a slower version. So it's like Francis didn't give a fuck
Oh
about the
yeah, yeah, no,
rollbacks.
yeah, okay, I forgot about that version of it. Yeah,
It
that
was
was
wild.
yeah,
And I love the way that Chris talks about the lifespan of the song. How he's like, there was just a piece missing. They
mm,
recorded it for Potemkin City Limits, the record, but there was just something about it that didn't sit right with them. And then between that record and the next record, they essentially solved the puzzle
yeah.
into the version that we have gone on to know and love. And
And
I just
I love that he kept the title. It was obviously going to be the title track for the previous album and got rolled over to supporting cast. And I love that he just stuck with the title.
it's funny. It's like
Yeah,
it's humorous because like I feel like most bands would not have done that. And the
no,
fact that Propaganda, their philosophy is like if there's something that you feel makes slam dunk economic sense, don't do that. Do the other thing.
yeah,
And they just have this because this is like obviously not a funny song. It's not a humorous song, but
mm,
there is that element of their personalities and the fact that they didn't change the name of the song. And then it just kind of shows you who they are as people, and that
yeah,
even when they're being serious, they are always seeking to find a little bit of joy and humor. And I love that little joke that they named a song on the next record after the previous
yeah,
record's title.
yeah. It's brilliant. It's brilliant.
So, why did you pick Potemkin City Limits out of all of the absolutely fantastic masterpieces on this record?
I think it comes down to the lyrical content more than the musicality of the song. I think there's, in terms of technicality, and there's obviously a lot of songs on supporting cast that I could have put ahead of this, but I think this one, sort of had the biggest impact on me. The I was just seen your cat there.
Yeah, this is Eleanor. I'll show her to you. Hold on, let me turn the light on. Hi, she's my little baby.
Nice to meet you.
There she is. She can just
Very
hang
cute.
out for a minute. I'm just leaving this in the episode too. Everybody, my cat is standing on the back of my chair right now. It's all good.
Yeah, so obviously they've done other songs on veganism. Um, that I think, yeah, this one had the biggest impact on me, and I think it was partly from the way it was written and the time of my life that I found it. So as I said before, I got into propaganda in about 2011, and maybe not long after that, I got a job working in the meat industry,
Interesting.
and I'd obviously been listening to this album for a while. I think I knew that. I think I knew they were a vegan band already. And I just remember listening to this song and the way it's written. Obviously, it's not explicitly obvious. It's about a pig,
Hmm.
and yeah, I remember listening and thinking, what's this about? I don't know why. I don't know why this one stood out to me, but this was the one I had to sort of Google and dig into the lyrics and read the lyrics more, and found out it was about the pig that escaped from the abattoir. And yeah, I it was a weird moment figuring that out, and having this job in the meat industry. Um, yeah, and as the lyrics say, it's that kind of dissonance, the cognitive dissonance. Uh, yeah, and I love how it's all framed. You think it's a human living under some sort of kind of oppression and escaping. And I think that's so important to make people realize that why do we assume animals have different experiences from us? Why we can't get inside their heads. We don't know how, no matter how many studies are done on the intelligence of animals, we never really know what it's like inside their head. So why would you not just assume that what they go through is similar to how a human perceives the world? And obviously that's complete opposite to how most people are brought up to to think about, especially livestock animals.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, I worked in this job, and it was when I worked in I was based in an office job. I wasn't getting my hands dirty, so to speak. But I had to go in and witness things in the slaughterhouse. That was part of my job. And yeah, I think in some ways the people that work in those environments are the ones with the highest level of cognitive dissonance. I know you've spoke on the podcast before about the PTSD like symptoms that a lot of people get and things, but I think you've also got to kind of justify to yourself that this is a job that you're doing it for the right reasons. You do it, it's okay to do this. This is kind of the natural way of the world. Whatever you need to to keep yourself in that job. And for me, I know sort of the more I was working there and the more I learned about it, I felt like I was doing mental gymnastics to justify it to myself sometimes. But in terms of the people, something I found really interesting was, and trigger warning if you don't want to hear about how people don't want to hear about how animals are slaughtered for meat, maybe skip ahead a bit. But the way it's done in a lot of abattoirs is the animal will be stunned either with a captive bolt pistol or electricity,
Mm-hmm.
and then bled out. And the idea is the bolt or the electricity stuns them, and then the bleeding out is what actually kills them. And I remember talking to some of the guys that worked there and did these jobs, and the guys with the bolt pistol, they would say, "Oh yeah, this bit stuns them," and then the guy bleeding it out, that's what actually kills the animal. And then I remember talking, to the guy with the knife who's like on the other side of the wall from where the bolt bit happens, and he was saying, "Oh yeah, they're already sort of dead when they get to me. The bolt is what kills them,
Hmm.
and the bleeding out is just what you have to do to start the process of the meat
So either
processing."
person was saying that the other person was actually doing the killing.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't know if that's what they genuinely believed or if it's what they told themselves to get through the day. I have no idea, but within the meat industry, it's very disjointed. So especially with the way it's all been industrialized. So that's a very specific example, but it's like that the whole way down the chain, really. There's the farms that they come from, and then there's like even within the farms, it's disjointed. There's the breeding farms, there's the rearing farms, there's with cattle, there's the bit where they actually fatten them up, and that can be all done on different farms. There's the slaughterhouse, there's the butchery, there's the packaging. So there's not many people that see the whole process.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me, with my job was sort of looking at the whole supply chain, so I kind of did see the whole thing. And yeah, it was very apparent to me that a lot of people don't see the whole process, and that's kind of why it's almost easier to get that cognitive dissonance in place.
Yeah.
Uh, and that's obviously slaughterhouses are only a small part of it. What happens on the farms can be that's like the majority of the animal's life. So if the conditions are cruel there, it's that's in some ways that's a much bigger part than what happens to them. Maybe the last few minutes of their life.
Yeah.
But yeah, and the reason I had to see all that stuff was because of my job was to do like welfare checks in the abattoir.
Mm.
So it was like looking at when they were slaughtered and checking things were going, meeting the quotas of how humane in inverted commas the process was. And that was kind of a big part of me justifying it to myself, that where I worked was a lot better than some other slaughterhouses, and that the farms that we sourced from were maybe better than the standard farm. But when I don't know, I think it was probably when I was coming to the end of my time there, or just after I left, I was just like, at the end of the day, So it's almost like it's all a waste of time doing these welfare checks because at the end of the day, there's always going to be some compromise. These animals aren't living a natural life.
Yeah,
Surely it would be better if I just didn't eat any of this. Um, but at the end of the day, I think there is a place for welfare checks and things. There are vegan organisations, certainly in the UK, that monitor what happens in slaughterhouses to try and get them to meet some sort of baseline of standards. Because at the end of the day, most people aren't going to give up eating animal products. So yeah, that was my huge tangent on cognitive dissonance.
that's not a tangent at all. I like that right there is like as you mentioned earlier, like on this podcast, we've actually reported on a lot of the conditions for workers in a lot
Mm,
of slaughterhouses on over the last few years on this podcast. So I think we've done it several times on various episodes, and it's always really difficult for me to talk about whenever I
mm,
find stuff like that. And I got really into reporting on injuries and
mm.
deaths
Yeah.
reported in slaughterhouses, especially in the US. And I think there's different regulatory standards that are held to in the US and the UK. So I got really into like comparing what the conditions were like
Mm,
here, especially, and like who was being hired in slaughterhouses, where are they from, what is their immigration status,
hmm
like who
hmm
are they in our society, how are they seen, and what are those injuries like. So I got really into that. But your story is somebody who is there, who has seen it, who has seen the beginning, middle, and an end of the entire process. Like your story was actually missing from whenever
Okay.
we
I'm
had
I'm
some of
glad I
those
could
conversations.
I'm glad I could add something. But yeah, it's not really something I talk a lot about.
I can't
Since having
imagine it's very fun.
yeah, I'll always discuss it with people, but if I meet people new people that I meet, I wouldn't necessarily bring it up unless it's explicitly came up in a conversation. I'd never lie about the fact I used to work in that industry, but I don't really go volunteering it just in every every conversation I have.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah,
Was it
sorry, go on.
was it like how did you wind up in that? Was it just like an opportunity that came up at a time in your life when you just needed a job and it was just like, well, it's either this or not make rent?
Yeah, partly. I think I'd been sort of growing up in a rural environment, and my parents weren't farmers, but it was kind of all around us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think up to a point, you don't really question it, do you? That's just the way of the world. I'd worked on farms as like casual labor, when I was younger, and yeah, it wasn't when I finished university, it wasn't the it wasn't the career move I was planning to make, but I'd finished uni and been out of a job for a while. And it's sort of a time when there was a bit of a recession going still in the UK, and yeah, this job came up, and it sounded good, had prospects. I think even then, even having been brought up in that environment, my initial reaction to the idea of working for a meat processing company was kind of a bit like, oh, is that something I want to do? And then I was like, yeah, I'll just go for it. And yeah, as I say, you kind of just have to, once you're there and you feel like you're in for a penny, in for a pound, you kind of have to justify it to yourself. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting what you say about comparing between different countries as well, because I feel like that was something that was quite common in the meat industry. That when we were talking about animal welfare standards, when it was looking at other slaughterhouses in the country and stuff, even some of the ones I wouldn't have said were particularly good. And if anytime you were trying to encourage people to have better animal welfare, they'd just point to other countries and go, oh, well, they do it far worse than us. Like the UK is pretty good at how they treat animals, and it's like, you should you be comparing yourself to places that are even worse?
Mm. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like
it's
instead of improving purposefully, it's look over here, it's 10 times worse,
mm,
therefore we need no improvements at this time.
mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, it's all driven by profit. You can do things, you can make more money doing things quicker, and conditions are always going to suffer
Yeah.
for that. But on the other hand, some places see improving the animal welfare as a unique selling point, having the best welfare. So even sometimes when they are trying to improve the welfare, it's not with the animals in mind; it's with trying to sell a premium product, for example.
Yeah. Oh man, what an interesting connection to your own life and this particular tune. Yeah, John, I'm really pleased that you shared that story because like I said, that's something that this podcast was missing in all of the conversations that we've had about the animal industrial industries out there.
Mm,
Um, Hearing the story of somebody who actually saw it and went to it every single day
yeah,
as an employee
yeah,
is quite a gap to fill for the podcast. So I'm really grateful to you for sharing that with me.
thanks. And yeah, and just adding to that, I don't, although I, in some ways I wish I'd never done that, but at the same time, it gave me, I know I'll never eat meat again because I've got that full understanding of how the system works. And, you know, I've never watched a single vegan documentary or anything like that, because I don't need to. I've seen it all firsthand, and yeah, so I never would never say I regret working there because it gave me that understanding of how it all works, and I've obviously based my decisions on that experience.
Yeah, and having regrets on having gone through that, all it does is it kind of keeps you emotionally locked in that
Mm,
place instead of like moving forward with your own life. You know what I mean? So it's kind of cool to hear you say that you don't have necessarily regrets on doing it because I feel like that would be counterproductive to your own well-being and happiness in the future.
yeah, and at the same time, that's why rather than just pretending it never happened, that's why I'm happy to discuss it anytime because if it can help give other people an understanding, it's at least that's some kind of benefit. But yeah,
Yeah,
there was just one other lyric in the song that I wanted to touch on as well,
sure.
which was going back to the point of view of the pig and saying his only fond memory, his mother's loving eyes upon him. I think that was quite a big takeaway for me, and yeah, maybe like seeing it from a more emotional side rather than looking at the sort of practical or fact based pros and cons of animal agriculture.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and as I said before, we don't really know what animals are feeling, but if there's any chance that they perceive things emotionally in the same way that we do, then why would we do this to them?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I think it's just it's the sort of the way where it falls in the song. It's just such an impacting moment, and yeah, that's just one bit that always really stood out to me.
I love it. Well, do you want to chat about your last tune selection?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
love
let's
that
do
we
it.
went out of chronological order here, right? We started with the 2005 record, then we went to 2009, and now we're going back to 2001 with Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes, and the opening track, Mateka Moris Ukun Rasik. So, my first question about this tune, um, what do you think about the two separate versions, one
Mm.
including the Bella Gallos clip and one not? How do you see the two separate versions of this song that now currently exist?
Yeah, I mean, I love the reissue. Just
Me too.
in terms of the audio quality, I think it's so much better. I mean, I love the album anyway, but yeah, it's really like a breath of fresh air hearing it with the improved production. Yeah, I don't know where I sit really in terms of having it with or without the sample. Um, I think it was very important to hear that the first, when I first heard the album, because I think anytime you hear a sample, you know that it's, it's obviously been included for a reason, and makes you want to look into where it's from, what it's about, and I think with them taking those the samples out of the whole album, I don't think it's that they wanted to undo that. I think they probably weren't expecting to gain a whole new load of fans by doing the reissue. I think they were mainly
Hmm.
expecting it to be received by people that already were familiar with the album. So I think Chris said maybe it's something like trying to just improve the flow of the record, which I think it does. But yeah, I think it would be a shame for people to if that was their first exposure to that album to miss out having the sample. But I can never listen to the new version without thinking. As soon as I hear it come in, I still cast my mind back and think about the sample.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Awesome.
yeah, I'm in two minds about it. But for me, it's I like having both versions.
Awesome. Why did you pick this tune from Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes as one of your selections.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely knew I wanted a Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes track out of as one of my three. And I think it's a great sets the tone for the record. It's a great opening track. Um, and it's one that I probably one of their songs that I learnt the most from.
Mm-hmm.
And that that's partly in no small part due to the episode you guys did on it.
Thank you.
Yeah, but there's been plenty of times when I've learned a lot from Propaganda. Yeah, this is definitely a prime example of that.
Wonderful. Let's what do you think about the music? Because to me, this one's got like absolutely everything. This is a tune that to me was transformative in the way that I saw this band,
Hmm.
what they were capable of musically as performers and players. This is not the first song that I heard from Today's Empires. I
Okay.
heard Bullshit Politicians on like Napster or LimeWire
Okay.
or something like that in the lead up to the album. So this is not the first song that I heard off this record because I was a little cheater and I went in and found whatever I could find. So I heard this and Albright Monument Baghdad and
Mm.
Today's Empire is the title track before I ever heard
Okay.
this song. But then when this record came out and I went and got the actual album, obviously this comes on and it blows the doors off of everything that I thought was possible in punk. Um, Tell me a little bit about your musical thoughts on this tune.
Yeah. I think it's just a perfect album opener. It's got that very slow, sort of vulnerable intro, um, which really sort of it sort of eases you into the album and then rips into the fast-paced thrash sort of guitars. And yeah, I obviously I'm looking at it with hindsight, but it must have been a real change of pace for people that were familiar with the previous two the previous two records.
Hmm.
And I love that about it. Musically, it's really setting out their stand from the band they were going to be from this point onwards.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I think it's got the juxtaposition between the thrashy bits and the sort of more like mournful, sad sounding guitar parts, the sort of the higher thing, which I think I see it as like the thrashy parts are kind of like the angry parts, and the mournful sort of guitars are like the sad parts, which tie very well into the lyrics. Um, and yeah, it's kind of got that building bit. It kind of builds in the bridge with that tension, and then it's got like a really sort of triumphant sounding ending. Um, yeah, just after the intro, it just sort of pulls no punches. It's just in there, raging away until the end. And yeah, the bass playing on this is another some great bass runs, bass fills, whatever you want to call them. And for Todd, obviously this being the first track on a first studio album with him, I think it's a great bass performance too.
Amazing. Yeah, I love that the slower brooding. She laid it at the
Mhm.
gates of the
Yeah,
general's embassy.
so much like intent
Yeah,
packed into that.
whisper
Yeah.
echoed into dawn as she disappeared. It's got like some soul and feeling behind it too. It's really good. The truth will set my people free. Oh
Love
man,
it.
I
Love
I
it.
love it. I've got like chills now just thinking about listening to it. A song I've heard 1,000
Hmm.
times, in the last 20 plus years. I'm just like it still does that to me. So John, we've chatted over like Instagram DM a lot the last couple of years.
Hmm.
And just kind of chatted about the episodes a little bit casually here and there, just kind of as buds. But I'm curious, like, I know you have a very deep connection to this song. I know you love it very much, and I'm just very curious to hear your thoughts on the connections to the lyrics that you have, because it's a really deep one, but it's a very specific one, right? It's
Yeah.
comparing
Yeah.
Chris's life to Bella Gallos's
Hmm.
life in a really masterful way, showing the differences and the compare contrast between two lived experiences. And I'm just like curious where this song, what it gets you thinking about.
Yeah. I think that's something they do really well with their lyrics. I know Todd does it in quite a few of his songs, but here focusing in on one person's story, as the way that they explain this, the wider story about what was happening in East Timor. Um, I think it's just a better, it gives people a better point of connection than just hearing about a country that had its entire population um, sort of oppressed. Um, and it's factual. It makes you want to learn more about it. These are real people. Obviously, there's the liner notes that come with the album, which was gives a lot of context to it. But yeah, I just think that's very it's a very good way to do it rather than just singing about how awful things were in East Timor, and there's all these sort of nameless faces that are being described having living under oppression. Yeah, and as you say about Chris comparing himself to Bella, with around the same time, and saying what he was getting up to while she was going through all these horrific things. And yeah, I think that's something I was do with I was like thinking about the age I am now, and then looking at people like Chris and thinking what he was doing at the same time, when he was this age. And he was probably, when he was my age, he was probably writing Potemkin City Limits album. And
Mm.
I look at that and I'm like, some I can't imagine having the the intelligence to write lyrics about stuff like that, or the musicality to do what was their most ambitious album in my mind. And I think we all compare ourselves to other people of different ages. It's easy to look at other people in bands that are younger than you and doing something that you're blown away by. But yeah, in terms of more serious things, and especially like the comparison he has with Bela Gallos, and looking at the oppression in East Timor, over the last few months, everything that's happening in Gaza. And I've been following a lot of the personal accounts of the journalists
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
over there, and some of them are in their early 20s
Right.
and covering these atrocities. And yeah, you think, God, what was I doing in my early 20s? Just like nothing productive, really. And you look at what these amazing, courageous people are doing, exposing what's happening to the people of Gaza. And yeah, it goes back to what I was saying about having this personal point of connection. I think sometimes you're hearing the numbers of people that are being, the number of civilians that are being killed in Gaza, and it's kind of hard just to comprehend a number of however many tens of thousands of people have died. But when you've got these, just seeing individual stories is very impacting, and I think just gives people a sort of another way to connect in terms of empathy.
Mm. Yeah,
Yeah.
what's something crazy is that I have these memories of going to like this teaching job fair in 2006, and there was a school from Gaza that
Oh,
was
really? Okay.
hiring English language teachers, and I actually like had an interview.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like they were asking me questions like about my awareness of what life was like in Gaza, and I couldn't answer any of their questions like at all.
Hmm.
And they were like, "This interview is over."
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, they're like, you
You were
don't."
not ready for this.
They're like, you will collapse as a human being if you try to come and do this job. So I was like in an interview at an interview job fair, like on a round robin, fast paced,
Mm.
like where I was like jumping around from school to school kind of thing. And the person from Gaza would took like they talked to me for like 5 minutes, and they were like, "No, absolutely not. Move on."
Yeah. But I think not saying any of us would be able to deal with it, but obviously it is thanks to people like these young journalists that have obviously got it so much more into the majority of people's awareness now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think obviously before that, it wasn't something a lot of people knew much about.
Yeah. What are you who are you paying attention to with regards to Gaza and the war in the last couple of months?
I'd say the main ones have been Bisan, um, Motaz. He's actually just left Gaza. And then I'll be honest, I followed a bunch of accounts, and I kind of get overwhelmed at how much stuff comes through. I can't remember all their names, but yeah, there's maybe another five or six that are actually, based on the ground in Gaza, people there that I'm following. And it's I know it's you maybe shouldn't feel more worried about those people's safety than any other civilian in Gaza, but when you see things that they put on online about being trapped in a hospital under bombardment and things, and there's been nights where you're going to sleep. That's the last thing I've looked at on my phone before I go to sleep, and thinking, is that person still going to be alive when I wake up the next day? And it's, yeah, as I say, you sh- you should feel the same way about any person that's in Gaza right now. But yeah, you have these people that you sort of feel like you have this connection with. And I think
have you been able to talk to any friends or family or anything like that in your life about what's going on? Because I try to talk about it with a few select people as much as I can, but it's not easy to talk about with people in your own life because of how emotionally demanding it is to talk about stuff
Mhm.
like that.
Yeah, a bit. I mean, I'd say in terms of family, it's something I've touched on with them, and uh, yeah, not really going into great detail on anything, but they certainly know I've been to a number of protests around the country, pro-Palestine protests. Yeah, so most friends I would say I'm able to speak to about it. I've got some people that have told me, tried to argue with various points about things I may have said about it, which is hard, when you've got people that you hold close to you, and it's kind of alarming to see that people can believe something so different to how you're seeing the situation unfold. So yeah, it definitely had some difficult conversations about it.
Got it. Yeah. Um, I've chatted with some friends who are Jewish
Mm,
and have traveled to Israel
mhm.
in their lives, and it's one of those things that a lot of people are really grappling with, a lot of brand new realities that they have been able to conveniently not face for
Yeah,
their entire lives.
yeah,
So I can personally tell you that some of the people that I know in my own life who have been to Israel, who are Jewish, are like going through uh some pretty wild mental and emotional turmoil with regards to a lot of the realities as well. So it's been really interesting to see how this particular conflict, out of all of the
mm,
conflicts that have happened throughout the course of our lives, how this one seems to be such an important turning point as far as like awareness and
yeah,
being unable to look away
yeah.
from like the carnage and destruction.
And obviously, such a big part of it is out going back to our own country's involvement in what's happening over there. And this was another of the lyrics from this track I wanted to touch on was "A prison my country underwrote in paradise,"
Mm,
uh, and yeah, I think it's just a good example of history repeating itself. Uh, when I first heard this song, I had to go and look up and see what the UK's involvement was in um, Indonesia. Trying to um, take over East Timor, and yeah, no surprise they we were selling arms to Indonesia. Um, and I'm not claiming to be an expert on any of this, so anyone that's listening, please go and look it up for yourselves rather than just taking what I say at face value. But it's that's obviously the way the US and the UK backing Israel and continuing to sell arms to them. Even after the recent ICJ ruling, our the documents have been leaked from our government about them having concerns from the start of this part of the conflict that Israel's been committing war crimes and continuing to sell arms to them. So yeah, I don't. I mean, what more do I need to say about that?
yeah. Well, I mean, John, these three tunes that you selected are absolutely wonderful. I love that you chose songs from all three of your favorite records. I love these three songs. I love the variety of your own personal connections about
Thanks.
current activist work, past professional experiences, thoughts on your own country and like trade relations with other countries. Um, like you put so much thought into these three selections and you made it so personal and so meaningful in ways that sometimes I don't get as far as like conversations like this go. So like I love all of your connections to these
Thanks.
three
Yeah,
tunes. So I
and
just wanted to say
that's.
thanks, man.
Oh no, that's cool. It's been fun to chat, and yeah, even when the subject matter's heavy sometimes. But that's the thing, isn't it? Everybody takes something different away from lyrics. So
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah. So the last thing I just wanted to say about that song was I didn't want to hijack the entire. Obviously, the song's about East Timor. I didn't want to hijack the entirety of that and to talking about Palestine, but the reality is I had to learn about what happened in East Timor from a song,
Yeah.
and I don't know many other people that know even probably don't even know the name of the country East Timor, let alone what happened there. And I guess this is why atrocities like this continue to happen because people don't learn from history. Um, so yeah, I'm forever grateful to Propaganda for opening my eyes to some things like that. And
Yeah.
yeah, I wonder if there'll be a song about Palestine on the next album.
I would imagine. I mean,
Yeah.
and well, another source that I wanted to point out to folks, if they have not heard of this, I've mentioned this a couple of times. I think maybe on my Discord that I have, but also on maybe in a recent episode, is a book called Not So Distant Past by Dr. Joseph Nevins, and it came out from Cornell University Press, but it is a book about East Timor. It came out in
Okay.
2005, but I recently found that. But if anybody has um, any like library access, whether at a university, especially in a university, because it'll be so easy to find because it's an academic press. But a really good book that I'm enjoying right now is Not So Distant Past by Joseph Nevins about East Timor. Really fascinating stuff. So I'm still continuing my own interests
Mm.
in this exact topic because of this song. Like you mentioned, man, like you can't underestimate the power of learning about important social issues from music.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look at that book.
Um, John, do you have you ever seen Propaganda live before? Have you had a chance?
Yeah, been lucky enough to catch them three times.
Fabulous. What eras? When? Where?
So I think the first time I saw them was the Failed States tour, and they actually played here in Sheffield.
Mm,
So that would have been I think it was 2013, and it's I had no idea at the time that they were because had only got into them maybe a couple of years before that, and I didn't realize that they didn't necessarily tour all that often.
hmm
And to me, it was like, oh yeah, they've got a new album out. Yeah, they're touring to support that album as bands do. But yeah, I didn't really realize how lucky I was to actually be seeing them and so close to home. So yeah, that was with amazing lineup. It was with Comeback Kids, Shy Halud, and War on Women.
Awesome.
So yeah, very lucky that I got to see them so soon after getting into them. And so yeah, that was with Beeve on guitar, and yeah, just incredible gig. Yeah, and playing. Well, I mean, they always do a good job of playing stuff from sort of all eras. But yeah, just blown away by how great they were that first time I saw them. And then yeah, the other two times I managed to see them were both in London, and both very like happy coincidences that I was actually able to see them. So one time was in 2017, and that was with Petrol Girls, who I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Great band as well. So yeah, I think that day I was already down south in the UK because my previous band, was meant to record somewhere near London, and I'd seen Propaganda were playing the same night, but we already had studio time booked, and I was like, oh, never mind, I guess I'll have to miss them. The gig was sold out. Anyway, on the day that we were meant to be recording, our drummer phoned in sick
Mm,
that he wasn't going to be able to make the recording, and I was like, right. So I got straight online and managed to find somebody selling a spare ticket for the gig, and
perfect.
headed to that, and that was great. I think so. That was 2017, but it was just before Victory Lap, the album, had come out. But there was a couple. They'd released a couple of tracks from the album ahead of its release, and I didn't realize this at the time. But looking on Setlist FM since then, apparently it was the first time they ever played the song Victory Lap live.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, so that was pretty cool looking back, and that's one of my other all-time favorite songs by them. So that was a special one for sure. And then the year after, 2018, they were in London again, and I just happened to be down there for work. So yeah, got a ticket for that, and that was with Petrol Girls and Reviver. And yeah, it's not that far in the grand scheme of things, but I don't normally just travel to London for gigs. It's just that bit too far, and it's expensive to get down there and stuff. But obviously now being aware of how little that they tour, I would be there in a heartbeat to see them again if whenever they come back. But I think it's, again, with all the Brexit stuff, it's a lot of bands are skipping the UK entirely now and just doing European tours. So I'm fully prepared for the fact I might have to go and see them somewhere in Europe next time if they ever come back.
Well, John, I think that your band Without Love is awesome. I love that the song Without Love was not one of your selections. I think that's hilarious and awesome.
I thought it might have been too on the nose to pick
So
that.
so funny. But man, what a great conversation. I'm really hoping that folks will go check out Without Love. The EP Surrender, easily findable. I was like looking at your Bandcamp a few minutes ago as well. So I mean, I obviously hope everybody will go and check it out. We put a clip earlier in the intro, so I hope folks will use that as an opportunity to realize that your band pretty much properly rips, and will give you guys a little support. Where
Thanks.
would
Yeah.
you where would you direct listeners if they want to get in touch and follow along with what you all have got going on?
Yeah, sure. The best place to see what we're doing is Instagram. I don't have the energy to run multiple social media accounts, so it's Without Love HC on Instagram. And yeah, we're on all the streaming platforms, and Bandcamp. Our handle for anything that we are on is Without Love HC, so hopefully you'll find us on there. We also just put a track on a compilation a couple of weeks ago. It's called Hardcore, A Homeland Denied, Hardcore for Gaza. It's a fundraiser compilation with over 100 bands on there, some big names, and I think it's already raised like nearly $9,000 for Mecca for Peace, the charity. So that's worth going and having a look at. That's just search Hardcore for Gaza, and you'll find that. And yeah, that's everything we've got out at the moment. Yeah, we'll be working on new stuff constantly. So hopefully we'll have something out at some point. Yeah, gigs around the UK. Maybe some, we'd love to get over to play mainland Europe at some point. So yeah, just follow us on Instagram. Keep an eye out.
Awesome. John Schofield, thank you so much for coming on Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks, Greg. It's been great to be here.